Hello. It's been a while since I posted an astrological video. I was going to post one for the full moon a couple of weeks ago, but I had some health issues to take care of actually. But we have a new moon coming up, and it's on May 9th, and it's actually a solar eclipse. So this is another big deal. And once again, you can see I'm doing this as darkness falls, so in the race against time mode. I'll say as much as possible until it starts getting dark. More than most of the new and full moons that we've had for the past few months, this one it affects people really differently. There's some people for whom, there's a lot going on. Anytime there's a solar eclipse, that's a big deal. And there's a lot of planets making aspects to the new moon. So there's a lot going on here. But there's some for whom it's incredibly difficult, very, very difficult. And there's others for whom it's, not quite such a big deal. And maybe even on some levels, manageable or good or challenging in a way that really works and helps them move forward and succeed. And then, there's all the realms in the middle, people who, suffer some of it or some small amount of it. And I'll do my best to go into, some of the key points of that. The race against time mode didn't work out too well, so I had to turn on a light. What I was saying was that a solar eclipse always means that in a new moon, it means that the moon is in front of the sun and blocking the sun. So what this means is that our sort of inherent nature, what we think of our outgoing nature, our sunny nature, is overwhelmed by our emotional nature or our subconscious nature. Now, any woman who's gone through PMS can be very familiar with what this means. It means that all that stuff, all those emotions, all those kind of subconscious things that you were able to ignore as you went through most of your day, suddenly come up in a way where you can't avoid it. No wonder that since most astrology was written by men, this was considered a very, very bad thing. But you get used to it. So it still can be difficult to deal with and requires attention, which is difficult because it is a new moon, which means that many of these feelings are kind of like just barely felt and a little difficult to completely understand or grasp or see. And the same goes for the feelings coming up from the subconscious, that they block the logical, rational self, and they block what you might think of as your sunny, outgoing, positive nature. It's made more difficult by the fact that there's a number of other planets around the sun and moon that make it difficult to express what's going on and can bring up a lot of anger and frustration. And since they're in Taurus, they're kind of holding it and holding it in and holding it in until it just all bursts out. And all of these planets make a difficult aspect called an opposition to Saturn, which is in Scorpio. And Saturn and the moon never like being in difficult aspects to each other. The energies are too different. Saturn is responsibility, discipline, kind of what you're supposed to be doing. And the moon is your emotions, it's your need to be nurtured. It's much softer and doesn't really respond well to the kind of hardness that Saturn is about. So this can really bring up the feeling for some people that, they're caught between their own needs, and especially their emotional needs, but also their own needs and the needs of others. And the needs of others have this certain kind of heavy-duty responsibility, this kind of heavy energy around it where they can't avoid it. And that can bring up a lot of anger and frustration that's difficult to express, that may often be expressed the wrong way because it's held in until it just bursts out. And since they're in fixed signs, Scorpio, which has a tendency to be dramatic, and Taurus, which has a tendency to, kind of move sort of slowly and take things in, but the fixed signs all can have a little bit of a tendency to, that they're slow to kind of build to a feeling, but once they get there, it is just all out difficulty, all out anger or frustration or, violence perhaps. but certainly the feeling of like one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake pedal and not really knowing which it's supposed to be would be very, very frustrating and difficult to handle for a number of people. Now, as I said, this is one particular solar eclipse, unlike many of the others that we've had in the past few, for most of this year, really. This one affects some people really, really, they feel all of that really intensely. It'll affect our society in general, so we'll all feel some part of that. But for some of us, it's not really all that difficult, and in some ways, it doesn't even touch us. And it might even be kind of good in many respects. It might help us work through certain issues or difficulties. For other signs, it's actually quite difficult. Those would primarily be the fixed signs, and primarily Leo and Aquarius, the two signs that aren't Scorpio and Taurus. But for Scorpio, Taurus, Leo, and Aquarius, they have it the most difficult. But, for example, for many earth signs, this is not so bad. And in particular, for Capricorns, this can be a time when a lot of stuff can be worked through well, and even for Virgos, too. Although Virgos have other aspects to Neptune that can make it like a little bit more difficult to really sort of figure out exactly where you are with this. Like, you kind of know things are good, and it's like not so bad for you, and things are moving along, but you like feel a little bit like you're in a haze, or you can't quite figure out what you're supposed to do about it, and some confusion about yourself can come up. For most of the other signs, it falls somewhere in the middle. There's some good, some bad, some aspects of it. There's something that can help you out of any part of it. So you're not quite as trapped by it as the fixed signs are. If you're one of the mutable signs, which would be Gemini, Pisces, Virgo, and Sagittarius, you suffer a little bit more of that kind of confusion around what you're doing. But that's not as bad as what the others are going through. Nonetheless, the most important thing to remember as we approach this new moon, which is always a time of kind of, at the very least, it affects the next month. Some people say solar eclipses affect a longer period of time, but for at least for the next month, just be aware of the impulses coming up from the subconscious and the emotions, especially the ones that you might have a tendency to ignore, and pay attention to being gentle with how you work out, the difference between how you pay attention to those and notice those, and what your real responsibilities are to yourself and to others. I realize this is a little bit of a Wizard of Oz moment where we go from black and white to color, but there's a few things I want to say to wrap up. There's a really important message of this new moon solar eclipse for all of us. And, in a nutshell, it is don't grit your teeth, physically, metaphysically, or metaphorically. And don't just try to, like a bull, push your way through the obstacles that arise. Even if you think that they shouldn't be obstacles, that they shouldn't be getting in your way, especially if you think they shouldn't be getting in your way, that this is a time to work lovingly and carefully through them, to untangle them, to dig deeper. We are all called upon to dig deeper with Saturn and Scorpio. If you're having your Saturn return right now, which typically happens around 28, 29, and then again between 56 and 60, and then again another 28 or 29 years later, should you be so lucky. And it's a particularly significant time, and usually a difficult time, especially at first, where you face like what you're supposed to be doing with your life. And should you have Saturn in Scorpio, or even in Taurus, this is going to be, you're going to feel an additional edge to this new moon. People with their Saturn return, again, would normally be around those ages, and that should be around the end of 1982, 1983, and even into some parts of 1984. If you're having your second one, that's 1953, 54, and some of 55. Regardless of whether you are one of the people who are dealing with it most intensely or not, for all of us, we feel the effects. And as I said, the most important thing is to work your way carefully and lovingly and thoughtfully through the obstacles that arise. And then you'll be able to move ahead in a much smoother and easier way. And then you'll find that this solar eclipse and new moon is really not so bad at all. Talk to you soon.